And Harry has just been absolutely crushed in his verdict against the Mail, the publishers of the Mail and the Mail on Sunday. So it's hard to overstate what a complete and utter disaster this is for Harry. First of all, and most obviously, there's huge financial implication. Although the contribution of the costs is capped at around £4 million, it's still around 4 million that I would suspect that Harry will have to pay. We were told that a lot of the costs were guaranteed by Max Mosley's hacked off, etc., but that's never been confirmed. But the substance of what was handed down today at 2 p.m. was extraordinary. Justice Nicklin totally dismissed the case. A source at the Mail, a jubilant source at the Mail, described it to me as a slam dunk, and that is exactly what it is. I would argue that it's certainly the most dramatic self-inflicted injury ever inflicted by a member of the royal family in the courts of the United Kingdom, partly because they never go to court. But I would say it's one of the biggest humiliations for everybody else involved. I feel just incredibly sorry for Doreen Lawrence, who was dragged into this in an attempt basically to bounce the Mail into making a settlement, because she obviously is a huge hero in the United Kingdom for the work that she has done. Her son was murdered in a horrific racist murder. But everything was dismissed. Elizabeth Hurley, Sadie Frost, Simon Hughes, Elton John, David Furnish. I'm told Elton is far from impressed at being involved in this litigation. And there's some friction between him and Harry as a result. But, Harry made it clear, didn't he? This was the big one. This was what he'd been waiting for his whole life. And then it turned out when he got into court, it was unbelievable watching him in court. The whole thing just completely fell away. The star witness was this guy Burrows, Gavin Burrows, who just said that they had absolutely no, that the witness statement that had been provided in his name was fake. At that stage, I think that any sensible person would have pulled the litigation. I think there's a sense that the lawyers wanted it to continue to carry on. Michael Gillard, the Upsetter, has a fantastic piece that I restacked earlier, about how Harry and Doreen sought to open a back channel in December on Christmas Eve. Do you remember when all that meltdown was happening at the Sussex organisation and all the people were leaving or resigning or being fired or what have you? Apparently, at the same time, he was trying to find an off-ramp from this case. But they weren't able to find it because the Mail just said, absolutely not. We did nothing illegal. And apparently the Mail wouldn't sign up for a no crowing clause, according to Gillard. Absolutely fascinating detail. I urge you to read Michael's piece. I've tried to get Michael on the podcast repeatedly, but he's a very modest man and he refuses. The Upsetter, worth having a look at. So what does this mean today? Well, it's a total disaster. It's all the worse because it was self-inflicted. I think, if you look at the disaster that this tour was already, what happened up to now is now in the sixpenny place, frankly, compared to what has happened today. Because the other stuff is just like, people arguing about bedrooms and blah, 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 blah. Like, this is a completely different order of disaster. And then Harry also made a total, complete fool of himself, a complete fool of himself in his evidence and in the witness box. Unbelievably, self-pitying and arrogant, saying that there was this concerted campaign about him, and also saying that the only way that anybody could have got any information about his private life was unlawful information gathering, and that any information about his private life had to be illegally obtained. Well, his argument absolutely fell apart in the most extraordinary style when Charlotte Griffiths, the Mail on Sunday's editor at large, who's very, moves in very rarefied circles and all that kind of thing, produced this extraordinary email chain with Harry from 30 years previously. I mean, to be fair to Harry, who could imagine people would still have their Facebook messages from 30 years ago? But, and it just revealed that Harry had completely lied about the nature of his relationship with her. It was a very, very flirty email chain saying, "Oh, it was such a wild weekend. We had such a great time. Was that you zooming past in the car on the way home? Loved our movie snuggles. It was so great." And it was just like, you're just looking at this and you're going, look, I don't need to spell out what the implication of those messages was, but you're looking at those and you're going, how could Harry have been so incredibly stupid as to seek to put this woman, who clearly had some kind of friendly relationship with, on the witness stand? Did he forget? Did he forget he called her sugar and griff and signed off moi? And did he forget the time that he'd spent with her? And then another thing, actually, for me, it was almost as outrageous. Katie Nicholl, who's written 5 books about Prince Harry, who is the Vanity Fair royal correspondent, Harry basically said that the only way she could have got any of her stories was unlawful information gathering, and that the only reason she went to parties was to provide a cover story for the unlawful information gathering. And, Katie just stood up in the court and just said, well, that's not true. And Harry invited me into a party at the Kensington Roof Gardens himself, and I had a really fun evening. Uh, the Mail have defended this unbelievably full-throatedly. They put up everyone from Paul Dacre, to all the reporters, to Rebecca English, to everybody was roped into this. The notebooks were provided. It was extraordinary what the Mail threw at this. They were incredibly wounded and hurt by the inclusion of Doreen Lawrence in the case, because the Mail, very famously, when the killers of her son, Stephen Lawrence, were not prosecuted by the British state, the Mail did a legendary front page that it put these guys on the front page, and it said, the headline was, "Murderers, if we are wrong, let them sue us." So the Mail was incredibly hurt by Doreen Lawrence's involvement, particularly Paul Dacre. And I can tell you actually that the reason that the Mail got involved in the Stephen Lawrence, because I was working at the Evening Standard at the time, which is owned by the same organisation, and the reason actually that Dacre picked up this cause was because Stephen Lawrence's dad, I mean, so typical, was his plumber, incredibly, and told the story to his wife when he was working at their home, and they just could not believe it. They absolutely could not believe it. So it's an utter humiliation for Harry. It's a very expensive humiliation. It's come at a terrible, terrible time for Harry, who, as I say, flew home arrived in London yesterday, immediately managed to walk straight into a controversy standing next to Miss Anne Harriman, which is, fine, his old friend or what have you, but Harriman's wearing a provocative T-shirt, shall we say, a political T-shirt. And, it's not about taking sides in that debate, but it's just about, is it the ideal moment for Harry, a man, for fairly obvious reasons, not considered a great thought leader on the issue of anti-Semitism, by which I'm referring to his 2005 photograph of him in a Nazi uniform, which he blamed on William and Catherine. Was it really the best move for the first night? But as I say, all of that now really put in the sixpenny place by the halfpenny place, isn't it? By what has happened in the courtroom today. So just to recap, I've got to run now because I'm recording a video with Valentine Lowe at 3 p.m, the storied royal correspondent. I'll be getting his reaction for the podcast this evening, the Daily Beast Royalist podcast. I'll be getting his reaction this evening for that show. But just to recap, what we're looking at is he has lost the £50 million case against the Mail. The court has totally rejected all of his claims and everybody else's claims. They said that he's gone beyond giving factual evidence, that he was advancing arguments as he gave evidence. So that's very interesting. The judge has picked up on, he had to tell Harry repeatedly in the witness box, look, lots of defendants feel a strong instinct to argue their case when they're in the box. This is not your job. It's my job to interpret. Just answer the questions. He says that didn't actually ultimately influence his decision, but it's interesting that he notes it. The Daily Mail, of course, doing a massive victory lap right now, saying this is an overwhelming victory for the free press, a magnificent vindication of the Daily Mail's journalists, and accused the Duke of Sussex of wasting valuable court time with an egregious case. Just to reiterate, every single one of the 97 allegations made by the claimants has been dismissed. Harry's team always said if they could just get one over the line, they always made this argument that unlawful information gathering is by its nature covert because it's illegal. So it's incredibly hard to prove. But if you find one example of it, that would prove that there was that it occurred systemically. But they have not managed to find even one example. I think this is going to mean a massive shake-up in Harry's operation. I'd say that the David Sherborne would be off the Christmas card list following this rather massive oopsie. And I think it's what was it all about, Harry? You were sitting there in court having arguments about whether journalists obtained ex-directory phone numbers 30 years ago, using illegal methods. I mean, come on. And do you know what I will say? As I worked at all those newspapers at that time, as I say, I worked at the Standard, I worked at the Telegraph, I worked at the Times for a bit, I worked at most of them at some point. And I will say this, that phone hacking, I do not dispute that phone hacking was carried out by some organizations, but it was never carried out by the Mail. The Mail, that's not their business, right? That's not the Mail's USP. The Mail is not about digging up like scandal and horrific inside details like, the Sun, for example, very much, that would be their USP. And particularly the Mail on Sunday's USP, and particularly when it comes to Prince Harry, the product in which they deal, right, is high-grade social gossip. That's what they love, and that's what the Mail sells to its readers. And the idea that the Mail was systematically hacking into phone numbers in the way that the Sun was, or in the way, that News Group was, or the Mirror was, is just completely absurd. It's just totally, totally absurd. And so they ended up in this situation where they were trying to say, well, this freelance journalist in South Africa who got Chelsea Davies' flight number must have obtained it illegally, because there's no other way that it could have been um, otherwise taken. So Harry is now giving was just now, as he was standing up, was giving a speech at Chatham House. He, according to Hannah Furness of the Telegraph, who is there, she says that he looked shaken, he was swallowing hard, and that he, she points out he's not famous for his poker face. He's a heart on his sleeve sort of person, for better or for worse, and the court case result was etched on his face. He had not had long to absorb it, the magnitude likely sinking in throughout this afternoon's event. There will be a reaction to come, perhaps an appeal, imagine that, or an attack on the decision. For now, this side of the room feels flat, quiet, and defeated. I'm going to leave it there because I have to run. As I say, I'm very excited to have Valentine Lowe joining me, recording some reaction for the Daily Beast podcast that goes out tonight on YouTube at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. GMT. And I also, on that show, will be announcing my book, which I'm incredibly excited. And I just want to say that it's called, I'm going to tell you guys now, it's called The Dukes in the US. And in the UK, we've gone for The Dukes of Hazzard. So we're very, very excited. And I'm going to produce the covers on the show tonight. So there's different covers in the US and the UK. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly grateful to every single person who's subscribed to the Substack, whether you're a free subscriber, a paid subscriber, or just, have liked one of my tweets or one of my, whatever they're called, notes. I'm incredibly grateful, because it's all that stuff that persuaded the publishers, who I'm incredibly honoured to say are Penguin in the UK and St. Martin's Press in the US. They, for better or for worse, what publishers are very interested now in the platform that you have. So, all of you guys, thank you so much. And as I say, I'm going to run, and I know I'm not doing enough Substack lives. I'm going to try and do them, because it's wonderful to get all your responses and to chat with you. So thanks very much. Crushing defeat for Prince Harry, utter disaster, massive failure, humiliation. Take your pick of your most expressive words for a massive disaster. That's what this is. Goodbye, and God save the King.